Dmitry. In the Iowa District Court for Scott County, the state of Iowa, who is not the actual plaintiff, and the identity of the person who made this false report is being withheld from me. And then, there's a time limitation on what I can do to defend myself, because this is court, versus Jeffrey A. Soberoff, defendant. Now on the web, I have a website called Free World KGB. If you want to find out about the rape that I reported, you can go to Free World KGB. It's a real hard read because the feds got in my website against the express orders of Judge Thomas Shields, a federal judge, and they messed it up. And after a year and a half of trying to correct what they did, and I'm still not finished. You can still find out about that rape. Case number, you don't need to know that, and this is called Order on Initial Appearance. Charges: harassment in the first fucking degree. Upon review of the complaint and any accompanying affidavits, and you know something? I should have gotten those yesterday. Fucking day. Because there's a constitution that says that you can defend yourself. But this county of Scott wants to harass people. They just don't want to comply with the Constitution. And this is a new rule, by the way. There's a new rule. You see, I couldn't get into the Scott County Courthouse for a while because I used a public computer there one day to look up the criminal record of a few of people in the Butler family drug cartel. And this is what really got me thinking. This is why I took $7,000, approximately. There's probably more. Because, when you buy this electronic shit, you have to buy peripherals. And I did a 12-year investigation. And by the time I had looked at the situation I was looking at with some very powerful video cameras, and, I might add, a dedicated crew who I recruited from correctional facilities, I was ready to start publishing by 2001. I did not stop publishing until 2008, when my home was torched by two teenagers in Clinton County, Iowa, the city of Calamus. Upon review of the complaint and accompanying affidavits, the court finds that there is probable cause. I'm going to tell you all about this probable cause because even though they won't tell me who the complainant is, I'm pretty sure I know who it is. I'm pretty sure it's something I'm acquainted to. And this person has a friend, Chris Adams. He knows about telephone harassment because he's been charged with it a few times. Now, the last time that I know that he was charged with it, he came crying to me about how his girlfriend had entrapped him into talking to her boyfriend, who allegedly called him first. And he wanted me to represent him. I mean, they didn't even give him here's a card, go to the public defender's office. They didn't even give him a public defender because they know Chris Adams. Chris Adams harassed me by telephone for over a year. I got over 500 phone calls from him. Oddly enough, the police would do nothing. The court informed defendant of the nature of the charges and the maximum and minimum sentencing consequences of those charges. The court also informed defendant of his absolute right to remain silent, that anything defendant says will be used against him or her, and of her right to an attorney. An attorney will be appointed for the defendant if an application is made to the court and defendant qualifies for court-appointed attorney. Then they gave me the form, and I wrote pro se on it. Constitutionally, that's all you have to do. Representation by counsel. The courthouse in Scott County is totally different now. They don't have any filing cabinets. Everything is in the hard drive. They printed this out in front of me at the bench as I was talking to a very nice lady. Christine Frederick, magistrate, 7th Judicial District, and she was very nice. And then they gave me the upcoming dates, and I'm supposed to go do further proceedings on 4/03/2018 at 8:30 a.m. 8:30 is a really bad time for me because federal authorities hurt me and mornings are bad. Now, I'm going to tell them this, and they're going to say, well, that's the only time we can do this, court? Well, if I puke on the bench, I'm sorry. I'm just going to apologize in advance. And then we have release provisions. Do not check this box. The court has provided a copy to the defendant. Now that's the only 2 pages that I got. Dig this. This is one of 3. I only got 2 of these. There's something in here that's missing. I'm going to assume it pertains to the trouble that I'm having with the clerk's office. So now I'm going to read you some pro se motions, which they're not going to want to take until I can get documents from them to take over to the public defender's office. Now, the public defender's office has told me that if I use them as a backup attorney, I am the lead counsel, and this defense goes in the direction I want to go it in, not in the direction of somebody paid by the state to railroad me. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. However, I've got experience in this system. Okay? I already rode that train several times. And that's because I wasn't allowed to be my own attorney. And that's because I was never allowed discovery in these kind of cases. Once I had an order of protection filed against me by my second wife. I fell in love with her at first sight. I walked into a bar called CJ's, which I soon discovered was a crack hangout. But I didn't know it then. I just had read a thing, I think on one of the weekly magazines that comes out, a paperback, you pick them up for free in a restaurant or bordello or whatever. So, and it said, there's a jam. And I'm going, I'm up to jam, man. So I've got my guitar in my hand, and I got my processor under it, and I've got a little 20-watt amplifier, which really sounded great until Dave Bain broke it. And I go in there, and as soon as I go through the door, honest to God, I see the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. And then I'm just looking around for a place to sit. And I looked around and I looked back, and she's looking right at me now. And our eyes kind of locked. And this sax player I know named Frank is trying to hustle her. And she's blowing him off. And she's looking at me, and I walked over to her and I said, "What's a nice place like you?" Yeah, excuse me. "What's a nice place like this doing around a girl like you?" And she had a sense of humor. And we got to talking. And when we left together. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, Paulette gave birth to me. Enough of that. Paulette was, she had a residence. She seemed like she was had a life. She had a job. But it was only after a short time that I said, "Hey, look, I've got this big, huge house. Why don't you come over and stay here and you can save rent?" And then and she moved in. And then I found out she had a daughter. And I said, "Where's your daughter? Why isn't she with you?" Well, her daughter was some kind of let's just put it, ne'er-do-well. Okay? She was in high school, like 10th grade maybe. Now, by the time the relationship between myself and this beautiful woman ended, that daughter had 2 children. Now, the first child that she had, the first time she got pregnant, Paulette arranged for her to go to a unwed mother's home in Peoria. We were not married at the time, yet Paulette told these people that she was married to me. So her daughter's ensconced there for 9 months. And she got pregnant before she left the place. Now, Paulette had moved to California. She needed some space or something. And she moved to California, but she decided to come back to me. Lightning striking twice. And when she came back to me, she brought a big box, and I didn't think anything of it. And she instantly got a job at a nursing home, just a short ways away from my house. How convenient. And one day, while kicking around the house, I looked in this box. And there's brooms and stuff in it for cleaning, but they got stickers on them. Wanda had apparently liberated these things from the last nursing home she lived in. It was not only cleaning supplies, there were telephones and other items that she had stolen. Obviously stolen. They don't sell those things to the employees. And I'm thinking, I don't have stolen shit in my house. And I'm looking at Paulette in an entirely new light. And when I get down to the bottom of the box, I see some papers. They're much like court papers, and some of them are yellowed. And then I realized I'm looking at the abstracts to my house. And I'm not entirely stupid, and I got on the internet. And I discovered that Paulette was trying to scam somebody and sell them my house. And you know what would have happened? I don't know what would have happened, but Paulette was trying to sell my house. And her name wasn't on the deed. We were not married. And she had, and the abstracts to my house, which, who looks at the abstracts of their house? So I put them in a drawer, and I thought they were there. So I put everything back in the box, and I drove to St. Anthony's, which was a nursing home. And I said, look, I know my wife's busy, but she left some things in my house, and I want you to tell her that I'm not going to have these things in my house. I do not have, these things have a questionable origin. That's all I did. And Paulette filed an order of protection against me. And this was when she came back. This was after we were married. But she tried to sell my house before we were married. And she did an order of protection. And she was afraid of me, or something. I'm not sure. Simply because I took stolen items out of my house, and she had a car. Put them in the trunk of your car. I don't want to see them. And I got an order of protection. I have a record for domestic abuse from that already. Because I did what I did. I didn't threaten her or anything. I took material that shouldn't have been in my house, that I didn't want out of my house. And before I took that box back, I took... Oh, and she also had silverware. She also had some of my grandmother's silverware. So Paulette is a klepto. Now, this is what I thought would happen. Paulette would come home, and she might be steamed, and I would say, Paulette, you have a problem. You're a klepto, and your daughter's a slut. And yeah, I would have done that because I didn't find out that she came back pregnant. They didn't want to tell me. But Paulette was trying to do that because she thought I'd be pissed. I wouldn't have been pissed. Really. I mean, family is supposed to be a blessing, even if there's a troublesome member. So, and and these things happened in a different... Before I looked in that box and took it back, a few weeks before that, I found a letter on the refrigerator, which was out of sight to me, just going in the refrigerator, and I read it. And Paulette was going to try to explain to me why she didn't tell me her daughter was pregnant or something like that. So that night we had a little family conference. And I told Puff, Chiquita Oliver was her name. I told Chiquita that if she's going to have a baby, she's not going to make her mother raise it. And she's going to get some kind of a part-time job to learn about what life is like. And I'm willing to help, and everybody's willing to help. But you're going to have to do something too. You're not just going to go and fuck around. Chiquita left. She had already lived in Davenport for a while on her own. She knew places where she could go and crash. She was gone. And Paulette was pissed at me, and I said, Paulette, she's an adult now. She wants to get pregnant. Okay, and that's all right, but you already raised 2 children. And what could she say? Now, I'm not responding to you, so go out and find her and bring her back. She drew the line there. She wouldn't bring her back. And then I found the stolen property. And then there was an order of protection. So much for that. The motions to the court. Yada, 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 state of Iowa, motion discovery. I want to know the actual name of the actual complainant because it wasn't the police department. I was informed of this action. There had been a warrant out for me for more than a month. Now, during that time, I was taking a walk around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning in the neighborhood, and I was a block or so away from my house. And I decided to walk through an alley on my trip, and so I couldn't tell you exactly how many blocks away it was from my house, but there's a family organization, and I'm right by it. So I'm just walking around, and I'm coming up the alley to my house, and from behind me, somebody slaps me in the head, and my glasses fall off, and the guy pushes me down onto the pavement. And then he sees my glasses and he grinds them into dust. And he picks up the debris and he walks away without even turning his back. But I think he's the same fat-ass pig, and there's lots of fat-ass pigs, okay, in Davenport. And I'm thinking, this is the same fat-ass pig who beat me up in Genesis West. That's an interesting story. That's got to be on another thing. So this motion concerns the information I'm not getting from the court. Notice how I work this in. Now comes the defendant. I saw a name on a document on the Honorable Christine Frederick's bench. However, it was only positioned as, and the name Cheryl with an S was written, and then to the right of it and lower at an angle is written the word Drago. I didn't immediately connect that. Then I go on to say, oddly, no person, including, I believe, Miss Frederick, knew who filed the false report, but that, to the actual victim, seems improbable. I have reason to suspect the individual has been investigated by the Department of DHS for adult abuse. Please tell me if I'm getting warm. They didn't want to tell me, so I just asked him if I was getting warm. It gets better. In for the Iowa District Court for Scott County, yada, yada, yada. Comes now the plaintiff to ask the question, why did it take over a month for me to learn of this false report? Well, I learned of it from a very querulous woman at City Hall who asserted the police, not the state of Iowa, who were accusing me of harassment. Approximately 2 weeks ago, a Davenport cop slapped my glasses off my face, bent down, take the frames, and leave without looking back. My question is, why was I not arrested at the time? I cannot acquire the discovery in 60 days if courthouse personnel have run out of data in the computer. I was directed to the clerk's office by Christine Frederick. The public defender's office told me to get documents from the same source. I must bring them to them from the same source. But clerk personnel say they cannot get the computer to print the documents. I'm not sure because they were unclear in their explanation of why they could not do it. I'm assuming the computer forgot what is on the hard disk. Plaintiff asks for a 120-day continuance. Finally, in the Iowa District Court for Scott County, yada yada yada, comes now the defendant asking for all records from DHS regarding the actual complainant. So I'm going to tell you now what I suspect, knowing both the person who I suspect of being the complainant, and a person who actually telephone harassed my home or my cell phone for 500 times for over a year. Now there's a thing that they can do, and what they do is they put a trap on your line. But they wouldn't do that for me. At the time, I was an iWireless customer. And I had talked to iWireless about this, and they said, you have to get the police to do this, and then we can trap the phone calls, because, you know, they keep a record of incoming and outgoing in your cell phone. Even if you're paying monthly and you're not paying for individual calls, they know who called you and when. And putting a trap on your phone only means that the police are going to ask them for their records at a certain time. That's all. They're going to match up the time that you got on your phone. Your phone tells you what time you got your phone call. It's real simple. But the police didn't want to catch Chris Adams. And the police were already familiar with Chris Adams. But the police in Davenport will not do anything for me because I have a website out which has their pictures on it, some of their pictures. And these people are helping scumbags sell drugs. Check out my website. As a matter of fact, if this is the same person, and I suspect that it is, this person has already filed false reports about me when I was living at 1117 Colorado Street in Davenport. It seems she was irate because she had committed adult abuse, and so the state of Iowa, through DHS and the Davenport pigs, kicked her out. Walter didn't have a choice because they determined she was physically abusing him. This was before I met her. I did not meet her through Walter. I met Walter through her. And amazingly, I met this woman on the bus. And it's like the song, Another One Rides the Bus. And this woman starts yakking at me. And I'm thinking, well, everybody needs somebody to talk to. And there ain't no radio. So I'm listening to her and I'm being polite. And she's just wacky. And I'm being polite. And she tells me about this Nazi she's living with she won't give me her number. I said, well, listen, if you want to give me your number, she did everything. Yeah, I'm a musician. I said, well, we should jam sometime. Give me your number. She can't have people call her because she lives with a Nazi. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I'm an old Orthodox Jew. And even though the last great unpleasantness ended 5 years before my arrival on this planet, I had been raised with a phrase, never forget. So when this woman tells me this person's a Nazi, I'm thinking, oh, well, she doesn't like her landlord. She told me it was a real Nazi from Germany. Heil Hitler and all that shit. And she really painted a fucked up picture of Walter Ballman. It came to pass, because I was living in the street at the time, because of the Davenport pigs. This is an interesting story. There's a huge episode about it. When the pigs came to Walter's house after he rented me a room, they brought 2 of his children, and they ordered me upstairs. Now I am Dmitri, a free world KGB. I am spy. And I got spy equipment. And I had to have a little digital tape recorder, and quite frankly, I'm not using it to be a spy, but if I'm writing a song or doing something that I like the sound of, I want to remember it, all I got to do is punch a button and play it. Well, there are other uses for that kind of stuff, and these things are real small. This thing was like this long and this wide and this thick. So I squirrel it out of my pocket as I go upstairs, and I leave it on the stairs behind. So I recorded over 2 hours of the pigs slandering me and threatening Walter Ballman that things could happen here, that things the police would have to cause. And he should throw... And Walter, in a short time, it was only a few days before that police harassment started against me. And Walter had come to look at me as a refugee. And I told him my story. I said, and he said, I've read all these things, and this person, Cheryl, who had been ordered out of his house and ordered not to contact him, was still in contact with him. And she starts telling him stuff she's read about me on the internet, which is a tissue of lies. Truly. And those tissues of lies were all generated because I reported a rape. Now, Walter's curious, but he's got an honor system, and he already told me I could live in his house. So I explained to him exactly what happened. I showed him my website. I said, you see these people, they're selling drugs. And Walter says to me, it's none of your business. And I said, no, it's everybody's business. This is poison. And he tells me, well, people gotta live some way. And I said, how did you live, Walter? Did you sell little bits of poison to people that would steal their lives? Or did you work your ass off all your life? And he didn't bother me about that again. I told him that this kind of shit killed everybody that I cared about. And if it didn't kill him, it ruined him. And that was it. And Walter didn't give me any more shit. And Walter knew after he saw my website, and then after he saw what the pigs were doing to me, that I was telling the truth. that the Davenport police are up to their fucking top now in the trade and sale of cocaine, methamphetamine, prescription drugs, whatever the market will bear. Now, I want to add at this time that I've never gone after anybody who I know only sells weed. I don't do it. I won't do it. And I think that's nobody's business. Because I've never known anybody who got so hung up on weed that they had to get up in the middle of the night and go out and be given blowjobs so they could afford more. In the pot world, I have never seen that happen. And also, if you smoke pot every day, man, it will make you profoundly stupid. So, occasionally, I have indulged. But because of what the federal government has done to me, there's no... when I was a little hippie, you could buy a lid for a dime. And this was Colombian pot. This is primo cosmic feeling marijuana. And you could buy it for a dime a lid. Now, by the time, when I was a little hippie, I was an odd little hippie because I didn't smoke weed. I didn't smoke weed until I was well into my 20s. But that's another story. I don't think weed is bad for you. So, this woman who's been kicked out of Walter Ballman's house is keeping contact with him. And there's an order, I thought. But I guess the only way that the police could try to put me out on the street, and actually this activity did not put me out on the street, being at Walters made it so I was able to get another residence. But while I was in that other residence, the police saw to it that I was put out on the street. But they shouldn't have done that. Because then that frees up my time that I would use for my leisure to be in Crack Central and be using, a cell phone is a cool thing. There's an attachment you can buy. You can put a telephoto lens on your cell phone. The only disadvantage is you don't have infrared or Night Alive. But you can still get some good shit. If you're watching people trying to sell dope under a streetlight, why do people sell dope under streetlights? That's a bad idea. Anyway. This woman has been fucked with by the state of Iowa for committing adult abuse. Now, in my early knowing of her, she told me about this. She didn't like her reputation being damaged, and she told me she was on Facebook, so I should be friends with her. So I don't know, she's a nut, but it's Facebook. It's not like I'm living with her. So I punched up her on for my friends list. And she asked me, and I told her I was an investigative journalist, and I told her what I've been doing. And she asked me if I could help her with her public relations. And I told her, well, I'd have to investigate the case. Walter had the case because the Department of Human Services left a big old envelope in his pocket, in his possession with pictures. Now, this woman got into trouble because she tries to make herself more important than she really is. And when these people started to investigate a case of physical abuse, I don't know who reported that, but when these people, I believe it was Walter's children, when they began to investigate this, they sent people out to the house and they took pictures. Now, according to Cheryl Drager, her method of cleaning a house is to pick all the shit up off the living room floor, pull the couch out from the wall, dump everything that was on the floor behind the couch, and push the couch back up against the wall. That's the kind of pictures that I was looking at in this file. And I began to think, And you know, Walter, he's an old horny guy, and he's talking about Cheryl. She said that she was his caregiver. Well, if your caregiver has sex with you, that's called abuse. Now, right now, I want to make a flat statement. I don't think that's abuse. But you know, people can use sex to control other people. You got to watch out for that. But I didn't know that was happening yet. So so she's having sex with this guy, and she's acting like she's his girlfriend. You know what? She should have said she was his girlfriend. But instead she said she was his caretaker. And that is what started an investigation. So then they sent some more people out. And they documented how filthy that house was. And they documented the physical abuse which occurred because Cheryl had some dogs and she was breeding them in the house. And the thing is, you really can't breed dogs in the house because dogs have larger litters, and nobody who's got a dog that loves it is going to kill some puppies. So she had too many puppies when the pigs came into her house. Because the pigs come in with DHS when they're investigating you, as I understand it. And they took the puppies so that the ordinance of animals in the house was correct. I think that was a kind of a shitty deal. They were puppies, for Christ's sake. They weren't a whole dog, and she was going to get rid of them, but they took them anyway. These puppies are pedigreed puppies, short-hair collies, the dumbest dog in the world. But that's beside the point. So she's asking me to investigate this. And as I investigated it, I also found out she was financially abusing Walter. And she asked me to do an investigation and tell people on Facebook how innocent she was. So I did exactly that. I told the people on Facebook how innocent she was. She unfriended me. Now she's filed a false report, and she's used a very convenient scam. I think I can get around this, though, because I'm going to end up asking for her telephone records, because her outgoing calls are probably all placed. And what happened on the day in question, as I recall, in February, last part of February, I received a bunch of calls, which apparently, you see, my phone is really bad, and I answer my phone. I'm a musician. If I don't answer my phone, I could lose a job. I also have a website crew that's watching the activities of scumbags and pigs alike. And I got to keep in touch with them. So I expect calls from them if anything noteworthy happens, anything I want to publish. So I always answer my phone. So I would answer these calls and the line would be dead. And I would think to myself, and I do believe that I probably called Chris good customer service because I can't hear my phone calls. Well, what Chris Adams does when he telephone harasses somebody is he calls them up until somebody answers and he doesn't say anything and they hang up the phone. When he was telephone harassing me, and because I recognize his voice, I know who it was. He blocked this number, but I know it was Chris Adams. He'd go, no. He'd do that. And even though I blocked his numbers, his was the only kind of call that I was getting that was harassing. 500 times in a year. I couldn't get the police to do anything about that. My telephone company says they've got the records of where every of my incoming calls come from. They still wouldn't do it. And I have a soundbite of Michael Walton telling me, we're not going to do anything for you. Oh yeah, they'll do something for me. They will give themselves enough rope to hang themselves. The county attorney's office knows that this woman is harassing me. She even used a state agency to try to do it. And at the end of an investigation, an associated investigation they did with Walter Ballman's case. And he didn't want to be a case. He didn't want to be a case history. They came to Walter's house between 2 and 3 times a week just to check him for bruises because they were receiving reports that I was beating the shit out of them. The first time the police came to the house, I'm going downstairs to get a drink of milk. And I go by the front door, which Walter left open, and the house was airy. And because of my website, I was always leery of leaving the front door open. But, it was summer. It was okay. It was Walter's house. I always made sure that the screen door was locked. So if somebody tried to break into commit Hoot Gibson on me, I'd at least be able to hear him coming in. So I go downstairs, and I'm looking at this policeman who's just standing in front of the door, listening. And the guy was listening for sounds of a pummeling. Really, that's what he was doing. So I come downstairs, and he says, and he calls me by name, which I'm not surprised, because the Davenport police fucking hate me because of what I wrote on my fucking website, and because they're a bunch of fuckers. And he says, what's happening? And I said, well, I'm just going downstairs to get a glass of milk. Now he wants to know where Walter's body is. He hasn't seen or heard anything but me, and he's wondering where Walter's body is. Walter comes out of the kitchen. It's Walter. It's his kitchen. It's his house. Comes out of the kitchen, and the pig sees him come out over my shoulder, and he says, hi, Walter, what's happening? And Walter says, nothing. And then the cop starts to examine Walter for bruises. He didn't find any. That happened quite a few times. And then various ladies from DHS would come out just to see if Walter was okay. That happened for 2.5 months. And after 2.5 months, DHS told me that they had sent, and I had been questioning DHS because, as far as I knew, Cheryl Drager was not supposed to be pestering Walter on the phone at 4 o'clock in the morning. As a matter of fact, I mean, the guy's 88 years old. So if Walter would leave the phone in the living room and go up to sleep, I would take it and I'd put it in my room. And I would take those calls at 4 in the morning. And I would tell Cheryl Drager, number one, she's not supposed to call the house. DHS said so. Number two, it's 4 o'clock in the goddamn morning. What's the matter with you? You don't have any right to, I want to talk to me. I said, you know what you want to do? I think you want to go to jail. And I hang up the phone. Now, DHS must have been asleep because she got back in the house. But I was there. And during a 3-week period of time, I saw her drain Walter's bank account $4,000. And her name is Cheryl Drager. And I'm seeing a name. I'm seeing a name on a document that is on Christine Frederick's bench. And in a big space, there's the name Cheryl written with an S. Cheryl Drager spells her name with a C. And then it says Drago. And I didn't put it together right away. And well, I'm talking to the judge. And I ask her, well, I already know that the police didn't file this. And I already know that the state of Iowa is not the direct complainant. So I'm asking the person who's doing this and knows. Cheryl Frederick has to know because this is an action that's taking place between me and her. But they want to say state of Iowa because they don't want me to have my shit together before this limited amount of time that I have to get it together passes. So they don't want me to know who I'm looking for information for. Now, the Department of Human Services, was because, I wasn't dealing with the Department of Human Services that made a false report about me. There's a whole other league of those people in another office that do that on a regular basis. But, because they did that repeatedly, and by the way, I can prove it, because there's documentation, But the people came out of the house were real nice, and after 2.5 months, they concluded that Cheryl Drager was using them and these repeated benign home invasions to harass us. And they wrote a letter to Mike Walton. And they had requested or recommended or had filled out a complaint. I think that's how it is. They filled out a complaint, presented it to the county attorney's office that they wanted her prosecuted for harassment. And the county attorney refused to do it. I'm astonished. He refused to do it, but there's still a record that they did it, that they asked for her prosecution. And I expect to get that document also. And that combined with Michael Walton's statement that I have a soundbite of, we're not going to do anything for you, Mr. Soboroff, pretty much lays everything bare. But now they've gone the extra mile. They know this person is lying because duly authorized members of a state agency have said so. They know that this person is engaged in committing serial harassment. They know it. There's no two freaking ways about it. Now, where was I? Tell me if I'm getting warm. Okay, I read that, and I read that. Yeah, I read them all. Okay, and this is what I'm going to try to submit. But now they've made something that puts an obstacle in the way of the citizen. Well, now you got to go over and you got to spend 2 or 3 hours waiting in somebody's office. But before you go to wait in that office, you got to get documents from the courthouse. So says not only the Public Defender's Office, but Christine Federick. Now I have to believe Christine Federick because she's in a higher pay grade than all of those other people, I believe. So tomorrow, I really don't want to put on a suit. Because if I put on a suit and I have to get in a fight with some drug scumbag and chop sake him, I might get blood on my suit. So tomorrow, I'm not going to wear a suit. And I'm going to go to the clerk's office. What is tomorrow? Like in about 3 hours? I'm going to go to the clerk's office. And I'm going to have these documents. And I'm going to and I'm going to end up going to the Public Defender's Office first. And how I go into the courthouse, what I'm equipped with entirely depends on whether the Public Defender's Office can sign a contract with me. Now I'm going to write that out as soon as I finish this video, which is very soon. The county attorney's office will not fuck around with the thrust of this investigation. Because I want to win. You know, it's really hard proving that you didn't do something that didn't happen. It's easier proving something that did happen. So what I'm going to tell them is, and you know, lawyers in Iowa do a really fucked up thing to criminal defendants, because they'll tell them, a court-appointed attorney will tell a defendant anything. The defendant will tell them where they can get evidence, etc. They'll tell them who they need to talk to, who needs to be subpoenaed for hearing. But the thing is, the court isn't interested in justice. The court is interested in winning. And in this area, they deal with the politically inconvenient by court intimidation. And I'm no longer going to be intimidated by that. Now, personally, I would rather embarrass Mr. Walton, who has declared war on gay people. I'll explain that in a letter, in a later video. But it came to my attention that Mr. Walton has actually declared a war on gay people, and he is willing to let people who have a disease infect people who do not, and not bring a charge, because that's against the law in Iowa, especially if it's a fatal disease. More on that later. But I would rather embarrass Michael Walton in front of a room full of people than just a court magistrate. But if in order to get this public record in, this investigation in, because clearly the woman's crazy, maybe there's privacy considerations, even though there shouldn't be, I'm willing to just do this in a bench trial, which you know is a much more risky thing. I would do a lot better in front of a jury. But I'll be able to appeal this for free. And I have an appellate defender who her name is Martha Lucy, and she won't let it go. Martha Lucy won my appeal. Martha Lucy has ethics. All of the court-appointed attorneys that I've been given have not. And they'll tell you they'll do anything, but in the end they'll say, no, I'm the attorney here, and I have sole direction of this case. And that means I'm going to sit on my ass until the day of hearing and go into court without a case. So be it. So they're going to have to sign a statement that they're not going to get in my way, that they are going to be a backup attorney. And what they're going to do is my grunt work. They are going to get these records from DHS. And if they can't promise me that they'll do that, then fuck them. Because if I'm not going to get the records, I can do that by myself. I still have a better chance in court in front of a jury because I'm going to bring it up to the jury. And you know, the judge might say the jury will disregard that last remark. But juries don't forget anything, especially when it's a topic like the prosecutor here is now prosecuting the person who DHS says was getting harassed by the plaintiff. This is Dmitry Ivanovich with The Naked Truth.